a distinguished guest with us who is a science communicator and a historian as well as a curator who had in-depth knowledge about the science, especially the space segment. We are now going to discuss about how ISRO has evolved as the preeminent space research organization of the world, how it has evolved, and what were the collaborative efforts that went into making this one of the most respected organization in the world. Hello, good afternoon. How are you, sir?
I'm very well. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's a pleasure being here, and
Yes,
especially
me
talking
too.
about
Yeah.
history of space technology. It is certainly something which should be talked about, but is not talked about very often.
Very often. Yeah, there's a problem because people talk about ISRO only when there is any rocket launch or any exploration to the
Yeah,
deep space
yeah,
or when something more important is coming.
yeah.
But very few have in-depth knowledge about how ISRO has evolved to this stature.
Yeah.
How can you explain the evolution of ISRO to the present state?
Oh, it's certainly a very interesting thing because our first Prime Minister Nehru was very focused on science and technology.
Okay.
In 1958, when he came up with this science policy resolution, I think that was the starting point of any major scientific involvement in the country. Councils like Vikram Sarabhai and Homi Jahangir Bhabha, and Bhabha used to be Nehru's very close friend.
Okay.
And I happened to have a look at Bhabha's and Nehru's letters. It's really fantastic.
Okay. Wonderful.
And because of that, I think we were able to do some really good science.
You mean to say that solid foundation was laid because of these two
Yes,
gentlemen
yes, yes.
interacting
I
with
mean,
the
you just
government?
cannot do any good science without having a good political backing.
Yes.
And especially people in power who understand science.
Understand the science.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
they should also have the passion to excel in that
Exactly,
field.
exactly,
Yes.
exactly, exactly.
Okay. How Homni Baba and Dr. Vikram Sarabhai shaped ISRO, and what were the limitations they faced at that time?
Especially when you look at a country which just got independence. Getting into space technology was certainly a luxury. And so to speak, there were so many people who were saying that India was not ready to afford that luxury.
Okay.
But these three gentlemen were very convinced. And Sarabhai used to say that space technology is important for all-round economic development of the country, which stands true even today. I mean, look at ISRO's projects and the kind of things that we've achieved so far.
Okay.
And Bhabha being, I mean, both of them were physicists.
Vikram
And
Sarabhai as well
Vikram
as
Sarabhai and
Homi
Homi Bhabha were both cosmic ray physicists.
Okay.
And very well educated. And they understood the potential of it. And when India went...
Can you throw a little bit about their educational background?
Oh, I mean,
Sarabhai.
Sarabhai was a Cambridge-educated physicist, and interestingly, Rabindranath Tagore wrote his letter of recommendation for Cambridge.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Wonderful. Such a man with such impeccable credentials.
Exactly. I
Yes,
mean,
yes.
when somebody like Tagore writing a recommendation,
yes.
who would not get in Cambridge?
Obviously, they deliver world-class results
And
only.
there's no doubt.
Naturally.
There's no doubt about it.
Yes.
There's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
And the good thing about Sarabhai and Bhabha being councils of Nehru is that they were very, very bold visionaries, if I can use that word. And majorly because of their vision, we had so many government machineries in place.
Okay.
We had institutions in place. I mean, look at Tata Institute of Fundamental
Yes.
Research. And even Tata Institute of Social Sciences, and
Yes,
Bhabha was
was.
responsible for that. Even the nuclear fuel complex that you have in Hyderabad, Sarabhai was there.
Yes.
And Sarabhai was also the chairperson of the Atomic Energy Commission
Commission.
after Bhabha.
Bhabha, yes.
And Bhabha started the dialogue of space technology. Everything is intertwined.
Correct.
Everything is intertwined.
Correct. Basically, when you look at the evolution of the space research organizations around the world, like US, USSR, or European countries like France, which is the major space power, see, their main agenda was to achieve the one-upmanship in the defense-related field. How was the agenda of ISRO was different to that of other major space powers at that time?
I think I can safely say that NASA certainly did start because of something defense related.
Yeah.
But France was more like India.
India. Okay.
Because I remember this in 1962 when Washington hosted a meeting of COSPA, which is the United Nations Committee for Space Research at that time. Sarabhai went and met Jacques Blama, who then became, who was just the technical and scientific director of the French Space Agency,
CNES.
which was just established in March 1962.
Okay.
And
You meant to say French Space Agency and ISRO were established in the same year?
Yes,
Okay,
yes,
that point we
that's what,
Yes.
they both started together. That's
Started
the beauty
together.
of it.
Okay, yeah.
And because both of these countries, of course, France was a developed power and India just got independence. We were just struggling things around.
Okay.
But when you're looking at a post-war Europe,
Okay.
even they had limited resources. And France, everybody knows, and you know it better than anybody else, in Second World War, it was war-torn.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, and the resources were very limited.
Okay.
And getting into space technology, again,
Was
even
a
for
luxury
France,
for
it
them.
was a
Yeah,
luxury.
luxury, yes.
Even for France, it was a luxury.
Yes.
But French had a better hand at it because there were so many other things that they were
That
good at.
supported the institutions.
Yeah. So in Washington, when Sarabhai approached Jacques Blamo and he was able to convince him, and he actually told Jacques Blamo that the only way that India could achieve better and go far ahead is by leapfrogging.
Okay.
And now leapfrogging was one term which was, very rare for Blamo.
Okay.
And what Sarabhai basically meant about leapfrogging is that in order to get the best and the most benefit out of the modern technology is to use the best things that are available right now and run ahead of time. And because when you want to run ahead of time, you want to harness anything that is possibly available.
Yeah.
Lama was not really convinced. I mean, space technology and leapfrogging, it doesn't make sense.
So you mean to say that the only resource that was available in abundance for them was the vision? Vision without
vision,
the border.
yes.
That was their capital.
Yeah, that was their capital.
That was their capital.
And and also Nehru understood what they were trying to do.
Because he himself, being a very passionate about the scientific temper and science
Yes, I mean
experimentation,
he actually talked about scientific temper more than anybody
more
else.
than anybody else in Indian history.
Yes, certainly, without a doubt,
Yes.
without a doubt.
So Nehru's vision was more
It was
relevant
translated
now.
into technology.
Translated
Yeah,
into
yeah.
technology. Yes. French has a better institutional support for CNES to evolve as a major space power.
Yes.
And whereas in Indian ISRO context, hardly space science is a hardly known thing to the departments, various departments that need to be supported here.
Yeah.
How various interdepartments collaborated together in shaping out ISRO from 1962 to the current scenario.
It's so interesting. I mean, I'll go back to Washington. So they met at Washington in 1962.
Okay.
And in 1962, INCOSPAR was established here. That was the Indian National Commission for Space Research. And the site was identified as Thumba. Now, interestingly, several years later, there was this place called Space Application Center, which was established in Ahmedabad.
Yes.
And Professor Yashpal became its director.
Okay.
In one of those memoirs, he writes that they had so many engineers and social scientists working together without killing each other,
Okay.
which is very rare. I mean, science people and humanities people, they just don't gel.
Yes.
But they were not fighting, and the entire world was very astonished about it. So then he says, the only thing that we were thinking at that time that we want to make India a scientific nation.
Okay.
I think that one will and that vision of making India a scientific nation brought every department together. T.N. Seshan, who was the additional Secretary of Department of Space, eventually became Chief Election Commissioner of India.
Yeah. I read somewhere that he is the person who coined the name Vikas for the
Vikas engine,
Viking engine, which was
Viking
adapted
engine
from
was translated as Vikas engine for PSLV,
For PSLV.
The Polar Satellite Launch
Yeah.
Vehicle.
Now it is still being used in PSLV.
It's a liquid propulsion engine which has a wonderful
It's a
technology.
war horse. War horse. PSLV engine. He coined the term Vikas.
He coined the term,
Oh,
which was also they wanted to dedicate something to Vikram Sarabhai. So Vikas was just a smaller
It gels
version
with
of
that.
Vikram Ambalal Sarabhai.
Yes, Vikram, yeah. Very commercial space application organization in France, Ariane space in the form of Ariane space, where maybe seen as there is a French space agency, maybe a partner or a minority stakeholder in that one. But how Ariane space evolved as a very premier commercial space launch application organization.
I think commercialization of space was a very far-fetched idea at that time.
Okay.
Because there was a mandate, United Nations mandate for peaceful users of outer space, and they established a committee for it. And we had very senior people become chairpersons of it, including Sarabhai and Yashpal and Rao and other people.
On Ariane space?
No, United Nations committee. So the good thing about Air and Space and Indian Space Research Organization is they had an agreement.
Okay.
And which was a non-commercial agreement.
Okay.
So they helped us. I mean,
so transmission of
the technology transfer was easier, and I think there was this person Nambi Narayan who was responsible for technology transfer during that time.
Okay.
And interestingly, when we sent our team to France, when you see a technology transfer, what do you see is they send you the designs and the technology, and then they you do whatever you want to do.
Okay.
But it was not that. It was not like that in France. What primarily happened, these people were involved in design reviews, in inspections and meetings and everything. So the team which got trained in France was trained layer by layer.
Okay.
So that, because that kind of skill was required for that technology.
Okay.
And I think we should thank French for that, because at that time there were very few countries who were helping India in that context. Yeah.
See, French space agency trained Indian space scientists to a large extent.
Yeah, and even NASA,
NASA.
There were two very senior people. If I'm not wrong, Kasturi Rangan and U.R. Rao went to NASA Goddard for training.
Okay.
And Sarabhai supported that.
Yeah.
The idea at that time was, see, we don't know anything, right? So what they used to do they used to trade the site of Thumba for other agencies to come and do experiments. And when they were doing experiments, they were learning from them.
Okay.
And that was the kind of exchange that was happening. And there's so many people who came for help. And I can safely say that ISRO, when it started as an international organization. Okay. And there was very collaborative effort. The thing that we are pitching right now, you should involve your peers, you should have teams internationally, you should involve various technologies across the world. That was already happening in India in 1960s.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that was the
very far ahead of our times. Yeah.
Far ahead of the times.
Yeah. So that is how ISRO was able to reach where it reached eventually. Yeah.
Yeah. Like French News Space Agency and NASA trained ISRO in shaping up very well. Is ISRO training any other international teams now?
We have exchanges. I mean, there's so many experiments that were happening here, and then we go abroad and they come here. It is always a collaborative effort in science and technology.
Yeah.
Gone are the days where a scientist sits in his, study and writes equations and is content with it. We can't do it anymore.
Okay.
So in order to do a major scientific work, you need collaborations, be it Indian Space Research Organization.
Okay.
Do you know there was a very interesting incident, I should tell you, the first launch of 21st November 1962, which is the birth of Indian space program. So the rocket was given to us by NASA, the United States, called Nike Apache.
Okay.
The payload was a sodium vapor experiment. So at that time, people wanted to do some electronics experiment. But manufacturing that kind of sophisticated electronics
equipment
thing
was there.
Kind of a far-fetched idea, which eventually led into translation into policy. That is how electronics ECIL was made.
Okay.
Electronics Corporation of India Limited.
Yes.
Yeah, it's just here in Hyderabad.
Yes. It's a coincidence.
It's so beautiful. I mean, this is something which you're not able to do. All right, let's make an organization to do so.
Yes.
So at that time, Jacques Blumot, already mentioned, he was the technical and scientific director of Kinex, and he was the founding father of French Space Agency.
Okay.
He brought this sodium vapor lamp from France to India, and he was brought from Bombay to Thumba in Vikram Sarabhai's car.
Okay.
And it was such a delicate experiment, and he just couldn't move it here and there. And then it was placed in Nike Apache, and then the experiments were done, and that is exactly where the Indian space program was born.
Okay.
The reason why they were doing these atmospheric experiments, because all of them, of course, they were cosmic ray physicists. The data would have translated easier into theory. And theory can be easily translated into data, and so that they were able to analyze all right whether the data is correct.
Okay.
Are we doing the right translation?
Interpolation. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, with the evolution of ISRO as of now, it is a world-class organization. We can say that.
Undoubtedly.
How ECAL came into the picture because to support the electronics, and how VDL came into the picture to give the dynamics that is required for a rocket space. It's an intercollaboration. Hyderabad is in the
I think Hyderabad is served as a very premier city.
Premier city, scientific research city, which has shaped ISRO to some extent as for it to evolve to the present day structure. Can we say that?
And ISRO had a very interesting autonomy as well.
Yes.
And because it was handled primarily by scientists and not bureaucrats,
yes.
And not even scientific bureaucrats.
Yes.
That is why it flourished.
Yes.
Even
now it is enjoying a degree of autonomy which is not being enjoyed by the other departments.
Absolutely. Because it is hardcore science. You cannot let a bureaucrat tell you, all right, I'll give you this much of money and you just can get away with this couple of components because I don't think it is good.
Yes.
That doesn't work. When Sarabhai died, MGK Menon was asked to become the director. He was the director of TIFR at that time.
Okay.
The Tata Institute of Fundamental Research in Bombay. And he was also the chairman of Atomic Energy Commission. Very, very famous physicist. In physicist circles, he is also called the Goku Menon.
Okay.
Yeah. So when Mrs. Gandhi, Indira Gandhi called up MGK Menon to ask him to become the chairperson of ISRO, he says, I can't become chairperson of ISRO. I already have so much on plate. Why don't you ask Satish Dhawan to become director?
Okay.
And this is what Indira Gandhi said, and I quote, he doesn't listen to me. I tried calling him, he is not picking up my phones.
Okay.
So Satish Dhawan was in his sabbatical at Caltech at that time. And he says, all right, so let's just do this. I'll hold that place for Satish Dhawan, but let's convince Satish Dhawan to become the director because there's no other way. I can't do it.
Okay.
He said, what do I do? I mean, person like Indira Gandhi asking MGK Menon, he's not listening to me, Satish Dhawan. What do I do now?
That's a big statement.
He said, and he says, you don't talk to him. Please don't do that. Ask the American ambassador and go and talk to him. Let me find out a way to do it. So at that time, Dhawan was also the director of Indian Institute of Sciences in Bangalore.
Okay.
So he finally agreed after a lot of persuasion and going back and forth.
Okay.
His only condition was that he will not move out of Bangalore, 1. 2, he will not leave the directorship of Indian Institute of Sciences. Indira Gandhi agreed just like that. He said,
that's
fine.
How Bangalore became the hub of space.
Exactly. That is
because of Satish Dhawan.
You should give Satish Dhawan some credit.
The credit, yes, for Bangalore to evolve as
exactly. He said, I'm not leaving from here, and if you want me to become director of ISRO, shift ISRO. Yeah, shift ISRO from Ahmedabad to Bangalore.
Okay.
And Indira Gandhi was like, fine, do it whatever you want.
Because she wanted Satish Dhawan
just
to
do
hand
it.
Okay.
Yeah, and that is the kind of autonomy ISRO had.
Wow. This is
no questions asked.
I think majority of the Indians doesn't know about how Bangalore became a space
exactly.
city.
That was the strategy.
That was the strategy. Yes. That is quite interesting.
That's very interesting.
Many people will be perplexed to hear this. That's great.
Even when for the first time when I found out, I was laughing. Because you don't see politicians bending down to scientists.
To scientists.
Exactly. That doesn't happen.
That doesn't happen.
Especially, I mean, not in the contemporary history of the world.
We should also give credit to Indira Gandhi.
And she used to listen. She used to listen. I personally remember Professor Yashpal telling me one of those days that they were launching some project. And Rajiv Gandhi was Prime Minister at that time. So this guy said, Rajiv, we can't do this. And he used to call Rajiv Gandhi Rajiv because he was a very senior person. He was the advisor to Indira Gandhi.
He is like a student to him.
Exactly. And he said, sir, what do we do? He said, we postpone it, announce it. He announced it, he postponed the mission. That kind of faith politicians had in scientists. And scientists had an upper hand.
Yes.
Like people like MGK Menon eventually become ministers of sciences.
Yes.
And that is the kind of vision we need to like further look at.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you mean to say that Indian Space Research Organization, in a epitome of faith, the scientific community enjoyed with the various successful
That was the
governments.
only way to become
And
the best in the world.
And the governments of the day believed in the scientific community.
Yes,
That is why so
Undoubtedly.
many institutions have cropped up.
Undoubtedly.
And that is what India is today.
Yeah,
We became one of the pinnacles of scientific research.
And it started as a socialist organization.
Yes, sir.
I mean, we wanted to help people.
Yes.
When Sarabhai approached Nehru, he said, let's have a space program because it will help economic development of the country. And Nehru was like quite in two minds, you know. I mean, we just got independence. He said, we just got independence. Can we seriously afford it? And Sarabhai, being Sarabhai with his intoxicating enthusiasm, he says, Panditji, imagine that we send a probe up in space. We'll be able to look at how big our country is. We don't even know how big our country is.
That's how remote sensing came into the picture.
Exactly.
How remote sensing is shaping up our weather forecast.
Exactly.
Crop sciences.
Crop sciences and everything.
Weather,
and Nehru agreed then and there.
And mineral resources.
Mineral resources.
Yes.
And there was another very interesting incident. You asked about interdisciplinarity of sciences in ISRO, right? So there was this disease which was harming coconut plantation in Kerala, and they were not able to find out where and how it is going up and about. M.S. Swaminathan was the person who was responsible of handling at that point.
Green Revolution.
He was father of Green Revolution.
Yes.
So that is a very interesting story. So he approached Sarabhai and he says, Sarabhai, we can't do anything like that because in ground you just cannot find out which direction to go. Can you get me a spatial image? He said, we don't have a project which can get you a spatial image, but I can certainly ask my friends in America and wherever. And I can get you a
satellite image.
Yeah. So they got a satellite image. Long story short, they were able to mitigate. These two gentlemen realized two things. One, we need better seeds so that we can fight the diseases. So M.S. Swaminathan then became the father of the Green Revolution in India. That point. And Sarabhai realized, all right, we need a remote sensing program. And that eventually translated into remote sensing program, which was launched in 1982.
Wow. That is how interdisciplinary faith.
Beautiful. This guy is an agricultural scientist. Sarabhai is a cosmic physicist. They both are doing space technology, which is very
for the
new.
advancement of the agriculture.
Yes.
Yeah, that
yes.
is no better way of
science program, satellite instructional television experiment. They wanted to teach people.
In remote areas.
So Sarabhai approached Yashpal and says, let's have a satellite TV and we will teach people. And Yashpal says, you don't have television. You don't have satellite. How will you do it? Have you gone bonkers? He said, no, that's not a problem. We'll do something. I'll have friends, American everywhere, and let's just do something about it. Fine. He said, why are you talking to me? Go and talk to Indira Gandhi. He said, fine. He went to Indira Gandhi. And Indira Gandhi had same arguments to us. So you don't have rockets, you don't have satellite, what will you do? He said, don't worry, I'll do something. And he says, she says, if you're able to do something, go ahead. I don't have a problem. Right? And she had faith in Sarabhai also. So at that point of time, he convinced NASA to bring a satellite closer to the Indian subcontinent. That was NASA's ATS-6 satellite.
Okay.
And at that point of time, Space Application Center was made, where televisions were made. And those televisions was taken to villages, and that is where the first instructional experiment was done. And that was also the birth of Krishi Darshan, by the way.
Oh, Krishi Darshan, okay.
The only thing that they want, what do we want to teach an agriculture economy? How to do agriculture.
Yes.
And that is how we propagated the use of genetically modified seeds.
Wow.
The entire history of development of this country is intertwined with the history of development of space technology.
Space technology. Wonderful. You have thrown so much light on the ISRO, how it has evolved as an interdisciplinary organization, how various departments collaborated to shape ISRO as of today, and how ISRO has shaped the evolution of so many departments.
Yes.
This is a wonderful insight. I think many Indians will be perplexed to hear also.
I hope so.
All this is a news to anyone.
Yeah.
Everyone who is listening to it. Yeah. Thank you so much for your time, and valuable insights into ISRO, how it has evolved as the world-class space organization. Thank you so much. Thank you.